Potatoes were not a luxury, they were breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This episode will begin with the question, what do people do when the system they depend on stop making sense? In the autumn of 1845, in Western Ireland, a family bent over a small plot of land carved from soil that barely cooperated. The Atlantic wind cut through their clothes. The ground was thin, acidic, and unforgiving. But the crop growing there had done something extraordinary. It has kept them alive. Potatoes were not a luxury, they were breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They were food, rent, security, and survival compressed into a single plant. When the farmer pushed his spade into the soil that morning, he expected weight, substance, and food, but what he pulled out sent shock waves through his nerves. He was trembling because the potatoes were black, rotting, and liquefying as soon as they touched the element. Within days, entire fields across the west of Ireland carried the same sickening smell. This was not a poor harvest, it was a total failure. His rent was still due, the landlord still demanded payment, food still existed in Ireland, but for him, it was rot instead of food. The farmer faced a question that would soon define a nation. What do people do when the system you depend on for your survival stop making sense? Ireland's dependence on potato was not ignorance, it was designed. Most Irish land was owned by Anglo-Irish landlords. Irish families rented tiny plots that grew smaller with every generation. Grain could not sustain them. Livestock required land they did not have. For them, potato farming was a solution and a blessing because it solved a brutal equation. 1 hectare could feed a family, but when land is taken, efficiency becomes survival. Monoculture, born of constraint, a single system, no backup, no alternative. Not because it was intended, but because they had no choice. The system for them was built on a single point of anchor, and for a system built on a single point of anchor, when that anchor fails, it comes with an impact, and that collapse may never be recovered. The enemy arrived quietly. Phystophthora infestan, a blight carried from the Americas, thriving in damp conditions, spreading rapidly through genetically identical crops. There was no scientific understanding, no cure, no warning. The crop failed in 1845, again in 1846, and again in 1847. Seed potatoes were eaten, recovery became impossible, and the question returned heavier each year. What do people do when survival itself becomes uncertain? Landlords knew people were starving. They also knew rent was due. Suspending rent threatened exit, mortgages, and income. So eviction continued. Roofs were torn down to prevent return, and villages were cleared. This was not cruelty, it was obedience to policy. That distinction is devastating because famine stopped being natural, it became political. Ireland was not empty of food. Ships continued exporting grain, cattle, butter, and meat to Britain. Markets were protected, contracts honored. The ideology of the time valued market stability over intervention. Hunger was not caused by the absence of food, it was caused by who the food was meant for. Relief existed, but it came with conditions. Families were separated at the door. Men from women, parents from children. Labor was harsh. Disease spread easily. To survive, you had to surrender dignity. Hunger was treated as failure. Survival became punishment. So when staying meant death, people left. Overcrowded ships carried the starving across the Atlantic. Disease spread. Food was scarce. Many died before arrival. Migration was not an opportunity. It was an escape. And even escape carried the price. More than 1 million people immigrated. Ireland population never recovered. Entire regions emptied. Languages faded. Generation vanished. The land remembers what numbers cannot. Irish communities formed across Britain, America, Canada, and Australia. Migration became identity. Memory became politics, and the past did not disappear, it traveled. The Irish famine was not simply a natural disaster. A single crop failed, but systems decided who lived. At every stage, the same question remained. What do people do when the system they depend on stop making sense? Ireland answered by living, and the modern world was shaped by those who did.